Recording.
We're live, baby.
We got fire in the hole. Welcome in, college football fans. It's that time again. It's time for the First and Long College Football Show. We're so glad that you are here. We are recording this on December 12th, and I like to clarify that at the top of the show because the topics of today's show are time sensitive, and there's a lot going on in college football. No games are being played today or right now, but my goodness gracious, we have got a ton going on. We've got UGA possibly losing one of its keystone prospects of the 24 class. We'll talk about that later in the show. And we're going to give you what we know so far about the transfer portal. And we'll give you what we think is the 20 best available and what 24/7 is thinking is the best available as of today. And recruiting updates, and we're getting close to early signing day. We're going to go through some names to watch for on that early signing day. Welcome in again. Thank you so much. We hope that you'll hit the subscribe button and come join our college football community. We've built this from scratch. This is our first year. We just completed our first season, and we're having a great time. And we're not making a dime off the show. We're just a couple of fans just like you. And hitting that like button helps this show so much, and we would appreciate your thumbs up on the video. We're less than 100 subs away from 500, so we hope that you'll help us get to that goal as well, because that is a milestone for us. People here on YouTube, Mason, welcome in. How are you doing today, my friend? And we've got a lot to talk about, don't we?
We do. It was a busy week in college football. Who says the season ends, right, when the regular season
never
ends?
ends.
I know we still have playoffs to talk about. We still have bowl games to talk about until then. But nobody's talking about that right now because there's a lot to unpack in the transfer portal. There's a lot to unpack in recruiting. Mark, I'm ready to jump into this. Where do you want to start, man?
Well, let's jump into that crazy transfer portal, and let's kind of get through some news that has broke since the last time that we've met up with you guys. And look, this show, we do a lot of different things on the show, and we're kind of transitioning into what is an, I guess, off-season quote unquote form. So we're bringing the show to you every Wednesday, and we hope that you'll be here. So we'll kind of go through some things that have happened since last Wednesday and some things that have happened even more recently than that within the last few hours on this show. We've got Oklahoma transfer quarterback Dillon Gabriel committing to the Oregon Ducks, and will go play for Dan Lanning in Eugene. This is a huge get, I think, for Dan Lanning. There was a lot of talk about DJU wanting to go to Oregon, and I think he would have loved to play there. He was a big fan of the Oregon Ducks, but I think Dillon Gabriel is definitely a level up of a player that DJU would be in Oregon. What are your thoughts about Dillon Gabriel, the former Oklahoma quarterback? He's going out west even further. What's your thoughts on this, and what do you think about Dan Lanning's get at quarterback here?
I think it's a perfect fit, really, for what they want. You know, they are losing Ty Thompson out of this class, so they're going to have to backfill that position with a recruit. They may not be done in the transfer portal either. They're going to need some more depth, but for Dillon Gabriel specifically, I think this is a great move for him. Very similar to what Bo Nix is, in a veteran quarterback that can play accurately, can throw the ball accurately, and he's not going to make a whole lot of mistakes, you know, and I think that's what we saw out of Bo Nix these past 2 seasons with the Ducks. And you'll see a similar type of offense. I think for Dan Lanning and the Oregon offense, you're able to add in Dillon Gabriel, and he fits the scheme well enough where you don't have to make any adjustments to the current game plan, right? Plug and play. You still have some pretty good weapons around him. I don't think that Oregon's done in the transfer portal. I think that they're still targeting a big name receiver. We'll have to see who that is, but I'm anxious to see what they build sort of around Gabriel at this point as they head into the Big Ten, and which will be a much more difficult schedule than what they faced in the Pac-12 to this point. They're look, I think Oregon's a really good team. They're building something special. I think it really starts with this transfer portal class. Oregon's been recruiting pretty well. They're going to continue to do that under Dan Lanning. But what can they get in the transfer portal? I think that's a big question mark. Let's see if they can go out, spend some of that Nike money, right, and get some top talent that's already proven to go out there and make a run at the Big Ten championship.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is a really good fit, and Dan Lanning is definitely doing his thing in Eugene, man. It's been fun to watch this past season and the past couple of seasons. And I do think that you're getting kind of a mirror image of what you already had in Bo Nix. This is a guy that's going to be able to step in, got a ton of experience. This is his third school. And he's a really good quarterback. Oklahoma was a top 10 offense last year, and he was a big part of that and was pretty much the reason that Oklahoma was able to beat Texas. Oklahoma's problems certainly was not offensively with Dylan Gabriel. That was not even an issue. There's a young up and coming quarterback behind him in Oklahoma. I think it was a good move for him. I think it was a good business decision. And as we'll see going through some of this transfer portal stuff, he's not the only one interested in Oregon. So I think you're completely right. I think Oregon is not anywhere close to done. And hey, look, a lot of these teams are nowhere close to being done. We're going to have to sort through it week by week, and we hope that you'll come do that with us here at the First and Long College Football Show, because we're going to be doing it regardless. This is a chapter book, and I feel like we're on one of the first few chapters of this thing for the off season. So we got 20 something chapters probably to go before we're going to know what's going to happen before the season gets kicked off. So a lot going on here in the off season, no doubt. Let's keep it moving. Riley Leonard, just within the last, I guess, few hours or last couple of days, has made it official. He is going to Notre Dame. We broke this on the First and Long College Football Show a couple of weeks ago. We didn't break the news. We heard through the grapevine that Notre Dame was a lock, and it made a lot of sense. And especially considering Riley Leonard is a do not contact. And I look for Notre Dame though. This is going to be a totally overhauled offense, and we're going to talk more about Notre Dame as well as we go through some of this transfer portal stuff. Notre Dame is on fire, man. They're top 10 in transfer and top 15 in recruiting for 24. And a lot of that is offensively. They have a mass exodus happening at wide receiver, and I think that was probably a good thing. And they're out with the old and in with the new. They're bringing in some serious talent for Riley Leonard to be able to throw to. Let's see if Riley can develop his arm ability and his passing ability. I shouldn't even say arm ability. We know he can throw it. He's a talented thrower of the football. Can he become a more seasoned passer? What do you think about Riley Leonard showing up at the Irish?
I think it's a good fit for him, going from one, you know, high education standard school to another. I think that Riley Leonard is one of the more interesting transfer portal quarterbacks in this class. I think he's the most sought after for good reason. He has tremendous potential and tremendous upside. I think that his floor is pretty low though, in a way. When it comes to arm talent, right? I think that that's kind of the biggest question mark is can he develop as a passer? Obviously, he's very athletic, comes as a really a basketball recruit for the most part. So, the running ability is there. I think that makes him a really intriguing fit for Notre Dame and for this offense and what they want to do. We saw with Estimate what they were able to do on the ground last season. They didn't have a running quarterback. They didn't have a Sam Hartman was not a Riley Leonard in the ground game. So I'm really interested to see how he fits and how the offense changes, because I think it needs to change with Riley Leonard to fit his strong suit in the run game, and then let him develop slowly over time as a passer. I think that he will continue to get better in that regard as well. But Riley Leonard, for having the sort of project aspect of his game in the passing game, he is a difference maker. I know when he gets on the field, there is not a quarterback in the country last year that I can think of. Maybe Jordan Travis is one that you look at, but there was not a quarterback that went out or got injured or came out for his team that had a bigger impact than Riley Leonard on the game. Because when he was in, Duke's winning games. And when he was out, they started sliding. And a lot can be said about their backup. He was also hurt. They're down to a freshman quarterback by the end of the season. But I think that the point still stands that Riley Leonard comes in and he affects the game more than I've seen most quarterbacks do. And I think that because of that, plus his arm, he does have a big arm. I mean, he can throw the football. I just want to see a little bit more consistency in that, and I want to see Notre Dame go out and get some more wide receiver pieces. That's something that they've lacked the past couple of years. This year, I think that they had, several wide receiver twos, but there's not a bona fide wide receiver one. They did go out and get Bo Collins as a transfer from Clemson. He was probably Clemson's best receiver, but someone who is 6'3" and 210. I still want to see more out of Bo Collins as well. I don't think that Notre Dame should be done in the transfer portal. They're also bringing in a guy from FIU, Chris Mitchell, who is a 4-star receiver right now. So that's a pretty big get. That's 6'1", only 170 pounds, pretty slight, probably pretty fast if I had to guess. And I'm anxious to see what weapons they can get around him, and is this offense going to be strictly based on the run game? Are they going to build that around Riley Leonard, or are they going to build an offense that's more of a pro style fit and allow him to grow as a quarterback? I'm certainly hoping it's the latter. But can we get the best of both worlds? Can we see them adjust, create a run game that fits his play type, and also allow him to develop and continue to become more of a down the field passer?
Well, I think as a Notre Dame, just a kind of a watcher of Notre Dame, I'm no Notre Dame fan or anything, but and tell me if I'm wrong here in the comment section because I'm correct me if I'm wrong, but Jared Parker was introduced as the offensive coordinator last February or this past February, I should say, in 2023. I feel like it was a very underwhelming performance by Jared Parker, and I know for a fact that this was a guy that was hired um, on a bit of a budget, right? The the amount that Notre Dame is paying their offensive coordinator doesn't match up with some of these offensive coordinators that you're seeing at some of these really big schools, and that's just kind of a fact. Um, I think that there was a little bit of skimpage going on there. Okay, and we'll see. He's on the hot seat this year because if it doesn't work out, he's gone. There's no doubt about that. But I'm interested as well as you are to see what pieces they're going to put around him. We've already heard that Bo Collins is going to be going to Notre Dame from Clemson. So I mean, look, he's a really good wide receiver. I think that Clemson had issues throwing the football, and I don't think it was his fault. So there's pieces. I'm interested to see if they're going to get like a guy for real, like a big time wide receiver. That'll be interesting to see. But this Notre Dame offense could have benefited greatly from Riley Leonard's legs this past year. I think it would have really, really helped this offense out a lot. They were really bad at times, man. It was unfortunate because Notre Dame had a really good defense this year. Going to be interesting to see how Riley Leonard fits in with the Irish and how they build around him. Just a little kind of, we're not going to dive into this one, but Blake Shapen, that was a quarterback from Baylor. He has transferred to Mississippi State to play for Jeff Lebby. That'll be, I guess, interesting. I don't know what to expect out of Blake Shapen at Mississippi State, but everybody knows that, or is, I guess, kind of talking about Will Rogers hitting the transfer portal and heading out of Mississippi State. And honestly, Mississippi State fans, they love Will Rogers, but at the same time, I think they're all kind of ready to turn the page and move on from what was a great chapter there with the Pirate as the head coach. I think they're all ready to turn the page and move on from that now. After this season, any comment there on Blake Shapen moving from Baylor to Mississippi State?
I think the move makes sense scheme wise. Baylor runs a pretty similar offensive system to what Jeff Lebby likes to run. He kind of comes from that same tree that Bryles kind of created, right? So I think that that'll be an interesting fit. I just want to see him do a little bit more than what we saw at Baylor. And two, I don't know how much that was Baylor's system. and their pieces, more so than his I guess his um he kind of came short in my eyes, right? He kind of fell short of expectations in my eyes last year at Baylor. I don't know if that has as much to do with him or with Baylor, I guess is my point. So I'm anxious to see what he's able to do in sort of a restart over there in Stark Vegas.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been a tumultuous time at Baylor, and we won't get into that. Maybe that's actually it's definitely going to be a topic for another show this offseason. We're gonna get into coaches' hot seats, and Dave Aranda a seat is just as hot as anybody's in that conference over there. Let's keep it moving. Excuse me. Thank you all so much for tuning in. We do appreciate it. We hope that you'll drop a comment in the comment section. Let's talk about some of these topics, and give us a like on the video. That really helps us out. We do appreciate it. We just talked about Auburn the other day, Mason. Now Auburn fans are they're in a bit of a frenzy. They're having a good time watching this team grow up before their eyes. Man, they're hitting the
Mhm.
transfer portal. They're hitting the recruiting class hard for 24. It seems like Auburn is a little bit of a team on the rise. And here's another reason why they pick up Robert Lewis, a wide receiver from Georgia State. This is a veteran guy. He has 70 catches in 2023 at Georgia State. He caught about 65% of the balls that were sent his way. I mean, this guy played like 800 snaps. I mean, he didn't miss any snaps. Um, to put that in perspective, Auburn wide receivers this year had 84 catches total. So this guy was only 14 catches behind Auburn's entire wide receiver core for this past season. This adds leadership, experience, and an obvious need for a reliable pass catcher. Um, so I am hearing that he's going to be playing the slot at Auburn, which is out of his about 800 snaps, he played about 150 snaps at the slot last year. So I would, it's not as he's not as experienced there as he is on the outside. But this guy's really good, man. With the ball in his hands, no telling what he's going to be able to do. He's going to be a great safety valve. That slot guy is always right there close to the quarterback, somebody you can dump it off to, and he's going to be able to do things after the catch that Auburn just hasn't. Auburn couldn't even catch the ball hardly, so just forget about after the catch. They were just focused on trying to catch the ball and possess the ball. This guy is going to bring some leadership to a locker room that's going to have, or a wide receiver room, I should say, that's going to have a lot of fresh guys in there that don't know what to expect in the SEC. I think this is a really big pickup, and if this works out for Auburn, I think it's going to be a really beneficial piece to this offense and this transfer portal class. Have you heard anything about this Robert Lewis guy? We live in Georgia, and I have watched a couple of Georgia State games. What are your thoughts on this and this big pickup?
Yeah, you mentioned it. He's a slot guy from Covington, Georgia, just down the road from us. And a great possession type receiver, got good speedster. What's interesting about this, right? So for those who don't follow recruiting, let me kind of fill you in on the receiving aspect of Auburn recruiting. So this season they've got Perry Thompson and Cam Coleman coming in. Both are 6'3" receivers, right? They'll line up well on the end, the X and Y receivers, right? So now you've got your slot receiver coming in, which is Robert Lewis. What's interesting about this? Last week we spoke about Auburn potentially flipping the Alabama commit Ryan Williams from Alabama to Auburn, and said that he might reclass from 2025 to 2024. Well, he has reclassed. This happened, I believe, last night or maybe the night before. He has reclassed to 2024. He still is an Alabama commit, though. And what's interesting, at 6 foot, right, just over 6 foot, 6 foot and a half, 165 pounds, you've got to think that he fits well in the slot, right? So if Auburn went out and got a transfer portal slot receiver, they probably don't like their chances with Ryan Williams. So I'm thinking that maybe this is a little bit of a sign that Ryan Williams, although he did reclass, I think he's going to be an Alabama guy once it's all said and done. Otherwise, maybe Lewis is just a safety net, but I'd like to think that you're probably not going to go out and get Lewis if you felt really good about your chances with Ryan Williams. maybe they need both of them. They certainly need the depth at receiver, and I think if they got both of them, they'd probably be pretty much done in the transfer portal and in recruiting this cycle. But just interesting to kind of point that out, that Williams is playing that same position. I'm kind of curious what their thoughts are, what their chances on Williams at this point.
Yeah, that's going to be something to watch over the week. Um, we've got early signing day coming up, the 20th through the 22nd. So that's going to be something to watch over the next week, 2 weeks. See how all that stuff works out and where he signs. That's going to be interesting. Um, we'll keep it moving here. Texas Tech hits a nice portal commitment here with tight end Jalen Conyers. He's formerly of Arizona State. He's 6'4", 270 pounds. He's a tight end. He was a number 40 overall prospect in the portal. Was a blue chip recruit, a top 100 player coming out of high school. Texas Tech has the 22 overall class for 24, according to 24/7. If you combine portal and high school recruiting, Texas Tech, they had a pretty rough year on the field, man. But they are hey, they're doing their thing, and Joey McGuire continues to bring talent in to Lubbock. What are your thoughts on this? As Conyers chose the Red Raiders over Georgia and Oklahoma, so he has 1 year of eligibility left. This is a big get for Texas Tech, and what I think is a sparse tight end group in the portal.
Yeah. So, coming in, you mentioned the recruiting class for 24. They do have a 5-star wide receiver. He's kind of their bell cow coming in this class. So couple him with a good tight end. The only missing piece now is quarterback. Tyler Shook is out.
Yeah.
He's going to Louisville. They do have a 4-star in this class. I'm not sure what's on their roster currently. Maybe if there are any Red Raiders fans out there that know of a quarterback that's highly sought after that's on their roster already, drop it in the comments, let us know. But I don't know of any. So what can they go out and get in the transfer portal? I think at this point, you know, it's tough to speculate because I don't have any sort of leans for Texas Tech at this point at quarterback. There are a lot of options, and I think that Texas Tech is one of those programs where they're going to have to wait until the dominoes fall and see
Hmm.
what's left.
Yeah.
Let's let's just be real. Maybe a Will Rogers is a good fit for Texas Tech. If he doesn't end up at Washington or somewhere that he may want to go. Um, I'm anxious to see it because I do think that they are kind of getting some pieces, but the biggest piece has yet to been played. So let's see what they can get at quarterback.
Yeah, we're gonna know more too. As these bowl games are played and things like that. There's gonna be other guys that go in and uh, also in the spring, there's gonna be guys going in after the spring. Now, a quarterback, you can't expect a quarterback to come in after the spring and be able to contribute at a high level. I wouldn't think unless they're already familiar with the offensive play caller scheme or whatnot. So, going to be interesting to watch as Texas Tech looks to keep on keeping on. It was a tough year, but they're going to pick up the pieces and see what happens. Um, this was an interesting piece of news, and this is going to tie into something that we're going to talk about a little bit later in the show. So bear with us. This will kind of be a cliffhanger here until we kind of consolidate this here towards the end. But Nebraska set to host Ohio State transfers Kyle McCord and Julian Fleming. I thought that was pretty interesting. Nebraska looking to level up a bit. The Nebraska quarterback Sims is in the transfer portal. He's a 3-star quarterback. Look, he had the turnover bug, man. Golly, Nebraska could not stop turning the ball over this year. Pretty tough, and sat on 5 wins for I don't know how many weeks there at the end. Really tough ending there for Nebraska, as I think it's almost been a decade since they've been to a bowl game. But nonetheless, they're hosting transfers Kyle McCord and Julian Fleming. This would be a nice couple of pieces. I mean, Julian Fleming is somebody that we're also that'll tie into some of our top 20 available players because he's on that list. What are your thoughts without getting into The Dylan Raiola situation that we teased at the top of the show. Dylan Raiola has been rumored to be messing around with Nebraska. Without getting in all the way into that quite yet, what are your thoughts about Kyle McCord and Julian Fleming?
I'm wondering if they're a package deal. And
What it sounds like.
yeah, if these two are looking for a Big Ten home specifically, um, to play at together, and I think Nebraska is a good fit. I like what Matt Rule is building, and I think that he needs a quarterback that can protect the football and play within the system. And I think that Kyle McCord does a great job of that. I think that there's a lot of meat left on that bone for Kyle McCord. I'm not telling you that I think he's going to be a Heisman finalist, but I think that he can play as an upper tier quarterback in the Big Ten, in Nebraska's system. You mentioned Sims. They got awful play last year at quarterback.
Yeah, they did.
If they get B minus play at quarterback, that's an extra 2 or 3 wins. Like they were really that close once again for Nebraska to winning games. And how many more games is Nebraska going to lose by one possession? I don't know. It's kind of mind boggling that they've been on a run like this under Scott Frost and now under Matt Rule as well, but it was Matt Rule's first season. Almost every coach has a year two bump, and I think that we're going to see that from Matt Rule and company for Nebraska this year. I do think that McCord is going to go to Nebraska. There's just too much smoke there, and where there's smoke, there's fire. And I think that this will be a great grab. Let's just get a 2-for-1 BOGO special
Hmm.
here, and get a very qualified wide receiver who can block, and go get Kyle McCord. Also, there's a really good 5-star, I believe he's a 5-star or high 4-star tight end coming in, Carter Nelson from the Nebraska area. That's an uber talent. I mean, Brock Bowers type for sure. So they've got a really good pass catching target, coming in next year that I think will be playing right away. So that has to be factoring into Kyle McCord's decision as well.
Well, that was one of my first thoughts too. Is it's going to take more than Kyle McCord and Julian Fleming because look, Jeff Sims, he had the turnover bug really bad. I mean, he put the ball on the ground and in the other team's hands way, way, way too many times, and it cost Nebraska several games this year. Um, but Kyle McCord is not going to be a guy that's just going to take off out of the pocket and I don't see him as like a dynamic playmaker. He's got a good arm. I think he's more of a thinker. I think he's more of a smart player. So you know, it's just going to take a little bit more. And Carter Nelson, like you talked about, I know Nebraska's got some pieces coming in. It's going to be interesting to me to see how Rule dresses everything around Kyle McCord if that is what ends up happening. Very interesting to watch. And Julian Fleming is definitely a good piece who has not reached his potential anywhere close. I don't believe. So we'll see if Rule can get the best out of him. And Justin Jolie, number 2 tight end in the portal from UConn, takes visit to NC State. He seems to be trending in that direction. Like I said, tight end's pretty sparse here. We don't have to really go into that one, but as sparse as tight end is in the transfer portal, a piece like that fallen is newsworthy. So we have to kind of keep an eye on it. Let's get into top 20 available players in the portal. Here's what we want to do. I understand how confusing this thing is. And as I said earlier in the show, we're in like chapter 2 of like 20 chapters on this thing. We don't know. We've got so many storylines and so many players going so many different directions, and we have less answers than we have answers at this point. We have no answers at all, basically. Very very low percentage on these guys, but we're going to go through, and we named a few of them at the top of the show. If you're watching this clip, you can go get the full version of this show on our page and hit the subscribe button while you're over there and give us a like. We really appreciate that. Um, so the top 20 available players in the portal, according to 24/7, that's pretty much who we frequent. That their site is one of the best for sure, and 24/7 has done a really good job of over the last few years of developing their ability to see talent, and that's a trusted source for sure. Um, let's go through some of these. Um, we talked about earlier in the show, Notre Dame has had a mass exodus at wide receiver this year coming out of that program. They got guys coming in and guys going out. Tobias Merriweather is one of those guys that's headed out. He's the first of several wide receivers to leave out of Notre Dame after the regular season, and the Irish are now they're depleted at that position. Bo Collins is a wide receiver from Clemson. He's committed to the transfer to the Irish and will be a building block for an overhaul at wide receiver. And Merriweather has got 2 years left of eligibility. So that kind of gives you a little glimpse into the Notre Dame wide receiver room. And we talked about also that Riley Leonard is going to be heading up the quarterback position there. What are your thoughts about Merriweather? I think this is a good piece for somebody. Collectively, the Notre Dame wide receiver room didn't work out very well, but I think that I think there was good pieces there. I just don't think it was the right mix and culmination of talents in that wide receiver room. A lot of receivers that I felt like had the same abilities and the same talents and didn't complement each other that well in that offense. What are your thoughts about Tobias Merriweather and take us through the next couple here on our list?
Yeah, what's interesting to me is that he's rated this highly, by 24/7. To me, I think Chris Tyree is the bigger loss for Notre Dame, statistically. So losing both of them though, I think is a huge loss, and I think that what we're going to see is a bounce back. Can you? Notre Dame needs to kind of have addition by subtraction in this case, and take those two pieces out and upgrade their wide receiver room. If you're gonna spend big on Riley Leonard, you got to give him the pieces to help complement his game, because he needs as much as he can get in the passing game at this stage in his career. Number 19, we've got Julian Fleming, wide receiver from Ohio State. He was the number one wide receiver in the 2020 class. No idea where he's going yet. I think that, earlier we talked about Nebraska. It seems like a good fit for him. And we'll see if he's going to follow Kyle McCord to where he goes, or if Kyle McCord follows Fleming, however you want to look at that. But this is a guy who has a lot of meat left on the bone. I'm anxious to see what he's able to do as the premier wide receiver. Obviously, playing behind guys like Marvin Harrison and Emeka Egbuka this past year doesn't help. He was probably about to get passed up on the depth chart by some freshman 5 stars that Ohio State gets year over year. So I think it's a good idea for him, a good business decision for him to take the lessons that he learned at Ohio State and move to become the premier receiver at another Power Five school. And I think that if he does decide to go to Nebraska, he'd obviously be the number one receiver there. And pretty much wherever he goes, he has that opportunity to become the number one receiver. And I think he's ready for that. I think he's a good size receiver that can fit that X position pretty well.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Julian Fleming, I'm super interested to see where this guy ends up. That's a definite playmaker, a highly touted guy, as you said. Can't wait to see where he ends up. Uh, Selfishly, as a Georgia fan, I was hoping he was going to come to Georgia, but looking more and more like him and his quarterback Kyle McCord are a package deal. We'll see how that turns out. At number 18 on our list, we've got Dion Burks. This is a guy that most of you probably haven't heard of. Admittedly, I hadn't watched a ton of Dion Burks until we did some of the digging on this list here. And he's a wide receiver at Purdue. He's the number 3 wide receiver in the transfer portal class for 24 currently. And this is recorded on December 12th. So this is all subject to change, right?
Yeah.
But as of December 12th, he was considered to be um, the number 3 wide receiver in the transfer portal class. This guy is already draft eligible, but wanted to come back and play for a big time program, and I think that's very admirable. But I think you got to kind of know the backstory on Dion Burks to understand why. In 2023, he exploded for 47 catches, 629 yards, and 7 touchdowns. But before 23 season, he had never even scored a touchdown. And so Oklahoma and Texas are a couple of the blue bloods that are after him. It's going to be interesting to see where he ends up. I mean, yeah, water wet, fire hot. Texas wide receivers good, right? I mean, my God, if Texas gets one more awesome wide receiver, I don't know what we're all going to do. That would be a big get for them, no doubt.
Yeah.
Um, let's go to number 17. We talked about Riley Leonard earlier in the show, and what he's going to bring to that Notre Dame offense, and so we won't rehash that. This is a true dual threat quarterback that played under Coach Mike Elko at Duke, and obviously Mike Elko has gone to Texas A&M. Freed Riley Leonard right on up, and he was predicted by us over a week ago to commit to Notre Dame, and he has done that. Um, so this is a second year in a row that Marcus Freeman pulls a starting quarterback from the portal. He's really really good at it. He's recruiting well and hitting the portal really hard. And Notre Dame, as we said earlier, will need to continue to look for wide receiver help in addition to Bo Collins, who they recently picked up from Clemson. Number 16, we got a guy named R.J. Oben. This is an edge player from Duke. This was a really good defense last year. I mean, that's pretty much how the bread was buttered for Duke. It was all reliant on that defense and Riley Leonard on the offense. This guy is number 3 edge in the portal class, 6'4", 250-pound edge rusher. He decided to skip the Senior Bowl and come on back for another year of college football. This guy right here, I mean, everybody's after him. Tons of schools are pursuing his services, including USC, Oklahoma, Auburn, Notre Dame, Florida State, Penn State, and there was several others. I got tired of typing these things out. He's pretty much got a plate full of teams, and he just has to pick which one is his flavor. But he did actually visit Notre Dame last week, which it seems to be a very common trend among transfer portal players. Any thoughts on those guys, and then take us into number 15?
Yeah, I think Oben, right now he's a lean to Notre Dame based on what I've seen. Might be following his quarterback over there. What's interesting is that he's not really considering Texas A&M, even though Mike Elko is headed to Texas A&M.
Yeah.
Typically, you would think that, especially a defensive guy playing for a defensive coach, might want to follow his head coach to Texas A&M. I thought that was kind of interesting, but um, looking to see him go to Notre Dame at this point. Number 15, we've got Will Howard, quarterback from Kansas State, number 4 quarterback in the transfer portal. USC is in pursuit of him, which is a little bit odd given the quarterback talent that they currently have on the roster.
Hmm.
This is a guy though that's proven he's got more starts than all of those guys, right? So maybe they go for the veteran quarterback and let the younger guys beat him out, or not, or have sort of a high floor at quarterback in their quarterback room. Miami is the other school that seems to be in on Will Howard. But what's interesting, we'll get to another quarterback later on who's a little bit more highly sought after, who's also a Miami lean. So we'll just have to see who kind of wins that out, and then let the chips fall, after that. And then number 14, we've got Trevor Etienne, running back out of Florida. He's the number 1 running back by, I think, every transfer portal recruiting or transfer portal ranking standards. This guy's a stud. He's dynamic, and he played behind a pretty bad Florida line for the past few years. So I'm anxious to see where he goes. It sounds like UGA might be where he goes, at least early on. That's what we were thinking, but no announcement as of yet. We'll have to wait and see. But this is a guy, I mean, 8 touchdowns last year, 5.7 yards per carry. Really dynamic. Again, that was behind a less than adequate SEC offensive line. So, put him, pair him on a championship caliber team with a good, offensive line group, and I think that you're going to see a potential Heisman type running back.
Yeah, well, and that I think that's exactly what is going on with Trevor in this situation. It sounds from everything that I read, it sounds like Trevor wants to play for a contender.
Yeah.
He wants to play for some type of championship, and I think Georgia would be a good place to do that. Just as good as any place in the country right now, no doubt. This is a strong runner right here. Everybody remembers his brother that played at Clemson, legend there. This would be a big pickup for Georgia, who needs a little bit of depth in that running room. They're going to have to replace some stuff, and it was kind of a lackluster running room for most of the year as there were injuries in 23. So it would be a very much invited running back 1A for the University of Georgia. And just kind of going back, you had mentioned Will Howard, and you know we keep saying where there's smoke, there's fire. There's been a bunch of smoke at USC about getting a quarterback in there. So what is the deal with that? Because every quarterback, every high profile quarterback that I see, it has got some kind of rumor at first about USC. But we all know that isn't it Malachi Nelson?
Yeah.
That's so. I wonder if it's not working out quite yet with Malachi Nelson. I think that's going to be something interesting to see, and we'll see how USC responds. We talked about Oregon taking Dylan Gabriel earlier. We thought that, and I'm kind of spoiling one of our players that's ranked here, but Dante Moore was leaving UCLA. We thought maybe he'd go to Oregon, and now I'm hearing stuff about him going to USC. So it's interesting to see USC maybe trying to hit the transfer portal for a quarterback. I find that interesting. Um, we'll keep it moving. Number 13 on our list, we've got um, Holden Stays. This is a tight end from Notre Dame. This is the number one tight end in the transfer portal class. He apparently enjoyed his trip to Rocky Top, Tennessee this past weekend and is strongly considering a move to Knoxville. He did not play in 23 for Notre Dame, but he was a highly touted prospect, and the Vols need a tight end badly after a recent decommitment earlier this month. We'll get into the recruiting stuff here in just a bit, and that is one of the topics that we'll discuss briefly. So this would be a big get, obviously, for Tennessee. They're needing a tight end here, and this is the number one available according to 24/7. So it'd be a big pickup for them. At number 12, we got a guy named Trey Moore. He's an edge rusher at UTSA. This is going to be a highly touted guy. And as you're going to see, edge rushers in the transfer portal, man, they pretty much just get their pick of wherever they want to go. If you're a highly touted edge rusher, you've got a home somewhere. This is one of the group of five's most feared defenders. Trey Moore is. Um, he's attracting a lot of attention for, as I said, from big blue blood schools, Texas, Alabama, LSU. These the last 2 years he has amassed 35 and a half tackles for loss, 22 sacks, and 104 total tackles at edge.
Yeah.
That is just extremely impressive at a UTSA school that's been pretty competitive. So he's currently crystal balled to Texas. So we'll keep an eye on that over the next week, and maybe whenever we come back on next Wednesday, we'll know if Trey Moore is officially headed to Texas. You want to take us into number 11, and you got any comments on those guys?
No, I know Trey Moore's about to make himself a ton of money, moving up,
He's about to make
and
him some oil money, sounds like.
good gosh, this was a recruit coming out of high school, no stars, right? And now he's listed as a 4-star on three's transfer portal rankings and
Anything is
value. Yeah,
possible.
valued at $313,000 a year. So that's a pretty good payday,
Yeah.
for a a UTSA edge defender. Number 11, we've got LT Overton. This is a guy out of Georgia, who reclassed from 2023 up to 2022, was a 5-star defensive lineman. He's going to play the edge. And, he was the number one overall player in 2023, reclassed to 2022, and was still a 5-star, which is really tough to do. But, he's been playing at Texas A&M, and now his head coach is gone, so he's gonna look elsewhere. Right now, it seems like he's a South Carolina lean, but this guy can play pretty much anywhere he wants. It's probably going to be a situation where you just kind of have to name your price and roll with it. So if he does go to South Carolina, that would be a huge get for the Gamecocks and much needed on their defensive line. And then you've got Andrew Makuba, safety from Clemson. He's the number one safety in the class, and this is a pretty good sized guy, 6 foot, 195. He's played a lot at at Clemson, and it looks like he was a 2021 recruit, if I'm not mistaken. So still a little bit of time there. I'm not really sure where the lean is at this point, but you got anything to add on these two?
I just Andrew Makuba leaving Clemson kind of puzzled me. I didn't understand um, why he was leaving. He was considered to be the starter this upcoming season. Um, this one kind of sounds maybe to me like Makuba is putting his name out there and maybe trying to get him some NIL money. And hey, mad respect, if you're not getting, your money or whatever, that's kind of how these guys get the attention. It's like, hey, I'm thinking about leaving to get this bag. And then the school's like, well, we got a bag right here. It just so happens we dropped one over here for you.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm interested to see if Clemson antes up and pays him, or if he's genuinely looking to get out of Clemson. So that's something super interesting to take a look at. Let's keep moving, and we're going to try to get through these top 10 here a little quicker, because these are a lot more names that you know already, and names that are more talked about. Number 9, Juice Wells, Antoine Juice Wells. This was a guy who got his bag. We talked about making some money. He made a bunch of money at South Carolina, and he barely played last year. Played in like 3 games, but now he seeks a more lucrative NIL deal, and is currently crystal balled to Ole Miss, who um, you know what? Ole Miss is anteing up right now for some of these players, and the portal king Lane Kiffin told his fans after the Georgia game, yeah, you want a team like that, then you're gonna have to buy the damn thing. Um, and it looks like the everybody's getting their checkbooks out. Um, Only played in 3 games, as I said, this past season. Texas and Ole Miss are the teams to watch here. Number 8, Chase, I don't know how to say this name. I always struggle with this one.
Santos.
Bizontis. Yes, I did it. He's an offensive tackle from Texas A&M. He's the number 1 offensive tackle in the transfer portal as of now. Again, I'll tell you this December 12th. That may change. Chase started in all 12 games for the Aggies this past season at right tackle. He's 6'6", 320 pounds. He's just one of the many guys that are exiting Texas A&M after the new coaching regime. He allowed 4 sacks and 315 pass blocking attempts this season. He has 3 years of eligibility left. So definitely a something that's going to be sought after. I mean, there's a lot of value here with this guy. Um, his original suitors in his high school recruitment before signing with Texas A&M were LSU, Michigan State, and Rutgers. Be interested to see if Jonathan Smith can pick up where Michigan State had left off in his recruitment. Maybe they can get him out there to Michigan State. Who knows? This is something we're going to have to watch over the next few days. And I was number 7, Princely U. That's what I'm gonna call him. Princely U. You man. Yeah. I don't name these guys. I just mispronounce them on the internet. Okay. He's an edge rusher from Florida, and look, this guy is a badass. I mean, I'm just here to tell you right now. This was a big loss for Florida. Um, He's a great defender. 11 and a half tackles for loss, 7 sacks, 39 tackles, and 17 QB hurries this past season. No predictions on his destination yet. Going to be interesting to see, though, because this was a guy that Florida was really counting on coming back. Was a cornerstone of this defense. Got a lot of experience, obviously, as the numbers I just threw out to you. And those were all team highs for Florida on that defense this past year. Princely U heading out. What are your thoughts on these, and then take us through the next few?
Yeah, I think starting with Juice Wells at number 9. You know, South Carolina, it's tough for them to hold on to these guys, right? Um, he's rumored to be going to Ole Miss, and I think that would be a huge get for Lane and company at Ole Miss. But I know you said that there are no predictions at this point on 24/7 on 3 for Princely U. They've also got him, rumored to go to Ole Miss. So another huge get for Lane Kiffin if he's able to pull both of these. And I think that getting both 2 of these top 10 players, and maybe potentially even a Walter Nolan, who we'll get to here in a moment. I mean, gosh, three of the top 10 in the transfer portal. I think we'd have to deem Lane Kiffin transfer portal king once again. Chase Bisontes at number 8, you mentioned. He's an offensive tackle from Texas A&M, but he's really more of an interior lineman. It's about 6'3" and a half, 310, 320 pounds. So he really kind of fits that interior more so than the outside as a tackle. But it looks like LSU is kind of the front runner for him, and that would be a huge get for the Tigers, as well as, like you mentioned, he's got 3 years of eligibility left. He was out there playing as a true freshman
Mhm.
in the SEC, which is really kind of makes you a badass, in a lot of ways. And we've seen plenty of freshmen interior or freshman linemen in general, offensive linemen who play in the SEC go on to become first round draft picks. So I think that's a really big name to watch in this class. He'll probably get a little undervalued because of his position, but I think that he's probably one of the biggest names in this class at this point. Moving on to number 6, we've got London Humphreys. He's a wide receiver out of Vanderbilt, and he's the number one wide receiver on 24/7's recruit or transfer portal rankings. So this is a guy, he's 6'3". He had 439 yards last year for Vanderbilt. He was one of their two, top wide receivers, him and Will Shepherd. Interesting to me that Will Shepherd doesn't have the higher ranking here as a transfer portal target because they're both in the transfer portal. But I think that London Humphreys is a quick guy who has a lot of good size. I mean, he's 6'3", and in high school he ran a 10.6 800-meter. This guy can fly. And I'll be anxious to see where he goes. It looks like UGA is kind of leading for him at the moment. But we'll see. There are other. I think he's going to stay in the SEC from everything I've seen. But I would certainly, as a Bulldog fan, love to see him play for Georgia because I think that he's a big target with a good attitude who can also go out and block when you ask him to. At number 5, you've got Cam Ward, quarterback out of Washington State, number 3 quarterback overall. He's undecided on the draft, but it seems like he's kind of dipping his toes in the transfer portal market. I think that Miami is the biggest suitor for him at the moment. But he's also mentioned wanting to stay on the West Coast at one point. So I think that Washington would be a fun fit for him. And Miami might be sort of the business decision, going to get the bag sort of deal there. But I couldn't blame him for going to for wanting to go to Miami and play in that beautiful weather there as well. But you got anything to add on these two?
No, Cam Ward is definitely one that's interesting to me. This was not a highly touted recruit here, but he has definitely played his way into a situation where he can get some money. Um, I definitely don't think he needs to be going to the NFL quite yet. We saw some through the middle part of the year some situations with him that he didn't look as good, but I mean 3,732 yards and 25 touchdowns through the air in 23 is pretty damn impressive. Um, and again, USC popping up on this list here as a possible candidate. It will be very interesting to see where Cam Ward ends up. He's a very talented athlete and a lot of fun to watch. So going to be interesting to see where he ends up. Number 4, Nyland Green. He's a cornerback from UGA. This is the number 1 cornerback, should I say, in the transfer portal class. He was a 5-star recruit from the 21 class. Um, he couldn't quite crack the lineup at UGA the past couple of seasons, and now he's going to move on to another school. So no predictions for Green yet. Maybe you've got some predictions, Mason, on Nyland Green as we climb into the top 5 of the best available players here in the transfer portal class. And my first thought on this was maybe he goes out to Syracuse and he follows Fran Brown out there, who was his cornerbacks coach at UGA. I'm not sure what that relationship's like. I haven't heard that. That was just my initial thought. Have you heard anything on Nyland Green?
I haven't. That would be an interesting choice for him. You mentioned it though. This guy was pretty much just a special teams player for Georgia the past few years. I remember his recruitment, and gosh, Georgia really wanted him. And he kind of
Mm-hmm.
completed that class in a lot of ways. and just never really matriculated. He's always seen the field, the past couple of years, um, as a a true freshman. Even you saw him out there, but never really was able to crack the starting lineup. And Georgia has recruited DBs out the wazoo. I mean,
Mm,
better than any team in the country the past 3 seasons. So it's not a knock on him to say that he couldn't start at Georgia.
right.
It's he's still a very good player, and he's probably going to play in the NFL one day. But that's why he's the number 4 overall player, left in the transfer portal market. So um, I'm anxious to see where he goes. I also don't have any leans, but I think Syracuse would be an interesting fit. I did see that Fran Brown got one of the Georgia wide receivers, Jackson Meeks, to follow him to Syracuse. So at least one Georgia player is going to follow a coach that maybe he had a relationship with in some capacity to Syracuse and play in that cold weather. But yet to see if Fran Brown's going to be able to get one out of his own coaching position or not. Number 3, we've got Dante Moore. We already talked about him a little bit. He comes out of UCLA, and he had to play as a true freshman this year. I don't know what you can really draw from his first year playing, at UCLA. This was a guy who was rumored to be going to Oregon up until signing day, and then decided to go to UCLA kind of at the last minute. So it was a huge get for UCLA at the moment, or at the time, and he struggled this year, but he's a freshman 5-star quarterback, and
Yeah.
I don't not everybody's going to come out there and look like freaking Trevor Lawrence. So it's not a big deal for a freshman to struggle. There's usually a huge learning curve from year 1 to year 2, and even from year 2 to year 3 for quarterbacks specifically. So I don't think that that's a knock on him. I'm anxious to see where he goes. I think that Michigan would be a good fit, given that he's from that area. But right now, Michigan State is kind of the more favored team in his state, and Miami once again is in on another transfer portal quarterback. They're going in pretty hot with 3 of the top 10 names in the country. So I think that seeing who Miami ends up getting, if they don't bring in 2 of these guys, will really dictate how the rest of the things fall. And how other teams attack the quarterback position specifically. And then number 2, and I'll let you do number 1 here, but Aiden Chiles, a quarterback from Oregon State, must have been a highly sought after guy. He was a 4-star coming out of high school, and was kind of put behind DJU, which is not a knock. DJU had all the experience last season, so this is a good get this will be a good get for any team in the country next year. And it looks like he's looking to maybe go play with his former ball coach Jonathan Smith, another quarterback that Michigan State is sort of after at this point in time.
Yeah, I thought that one was super interesting. I didn't know much about this guy, but apparently Oregon State fans certainly did, and were excited to see him be able to play. But he is in the transfer portal, and it'll be interesting to see which one. You talked about Dante Moore being from Detroit and everything. It'll be interesting to see what quarterback Jonathan Smith ends up getting out of the transfer portal, just like he did at Oregon State with DJU. So. Um, these coaches that keep going to this well for these big time players. We'll see if they continue to be successful. Number 1 on our list right now for the top 20 available players. Walter Nolan is a defensive lineman from Texas A&M. Obviously, the number 1 ranked defensive lineman available. Uh, Look, there's a bunch of programs after Nolan at this point for obvious reasons. Big, huge humans that can play the interior of defensive line. They don't grow on trees, and so there's only a select amount of these guys. He's going to get a bunch of money thrown at him. Um, he's a rare commodity, as I said, and he just visited Oregon this past weekend, so that'll be interesting to see if he follows some of these other guys out to Oregon and Eugene to play for Dan Lanning, who is a really really good defensive mind. Tennessee Vols actually finished runner up in his initial recruitment. So we'll see if he gives Tennessee a visit, or if that's something that he's still interested in. And I wanted to add, this list was made, and then a guy went in, and as I said here on December 12th, all this may change. There may be other players that come available, and there's obviously other good players in the portal. This is just the top 20. But Lance Dixon was a safety from West Virginia. This guy was originally like rated like a 98. He was a highly sought after 5-star that signed with Penn State and then transferred to West Virginia and had been at West Virginia for a little while. And now he's back in the portal. Very, very highly rated guy from West Bloomfield, Michigan. And no crystal balls on that yet.
Another Michigan guy though. Maybe Jonathan Smith has a, has an inside track on a player that I'm sure he'd love to add to a pretty bad defensive secondary for Michigan.
Yeah, yeah, it was, and it's hard to even tell what Michigan State had because I mean, gosh, they were just in give up mode the whole year. That was just a horrible, horrible year that I know Michigan State fans are ready to move right on past. And all of the college football community is ready for Michigan State to be decent at football again. No doubt about it. What are your thoughts on Walter Nolan?
Well, I mean, obviously he's a tremendous talent. Guy's going to go in and make at least $500,000 this year, if not more. They just you don't you can't find defensive linemen like this everywhere, right? They're specifically in the SEC. So I think that Oregon makes a lot of sense for them to go out and get this guy. They got Birch last season out of South Carolina. So I'm anxious to see if they're going to go get another big guy, I too, I think that Ole Miss is another one who makes a lot of sense. I mean, they did pretty well against the run last season, but obviously Walter Nolan can go anywhere he wants. Like realistically,
Yeah,
Georgia would offer him, and it's just a matter of whether or not. And I think that with Walter Nolan and not a knock on him at all. I think that it's really going to come down to NIL and who's able to pay the most, just given who this recruit has kind of shown himself to be through his high school recruiting and now as a transfer portal target. But I think that Ole Miss and Oregon are the ones to watch on that one.
yeah, absolutely. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to put on the top 10 transfer rankings, and this is again, I'm prefacing all this. This is as of December 12th of the year 2023. Um, Number one, you got Colorado. Number two, Arizona State. Three, TCU. Four, Minnesota. Five, Purdue. Six, Notre Dame. Seven, Charlotte. Eight, Kentucky. Nine, Vanderbilt. And 10, Louisville. These are going to change week by week, but I just want to. I want to kind of look at these each week, and we can kind of keep up with how teams are moving up and down. Obviously, the teams that are in the top 10 here are not going to be in the top 10, probably whenever this is all said and done, especially like Charlotte and things like that. But just kind of gives you an idea of the teams that are hitting the transfer portal the hardest right now, as you don't really see a whole lot of or any blue bloods in that list at all. But we'll see that change. Colorado obviously hitting the portal very hard as they've got a ton of holes to fill on that lineup. And now we're going to transition over to recruiting news and updates. It's getting to that time of year. We've got early signing day coming up on the 20th of December through the 22nd. You're going to see guys signing their letters of intent, and a lot of these guys are going to be enrolling early at their school to go ahead and be there for spring practice and all that good stuff. So what we're going to do over the next couple of weeks, we're going to keep an eye on the recruiting stuff up until that signing day, and then we will have a final signing day in February, but 95% of these guys are going to be locked up and ready to roll by then. So let's kind of go through these, and we've got a big piece of news that we've got to address right off the top here with the recruiting news. Dylan Raiola, 5-star quarterback, originally from Arizona, but most recently played his high school ball at Buford High in Georgia, was committed to the Dawgs. He's been committed to the Dawgs after a decommitment from the Ohio State Buckeyes. He's been with the Dawgs class for a little while now, a recruiting class that's currently ranked number one in the 24 class, according to 24/7. And all of a sudden, we see 24/7. Steve Wiltfong has got a crystal ball to Nebraska. This would be a huge get for the Nebraska Cornhuskers. And as much as I've heard online that they don't think that this is about NIL, it sure does sound like it's about NIL. And we're going to tie this into something that we heard earlier in the show as well, with Kyle McCord and Julian Fleming talking about going to Nebraska. How does this all tie together? And is this going to cause UGA to relinquish their top ranking in the 24 class?
Well, I think it depends on what site that you look at for 24/7. Even without Raiola, this Georgia would still be the number one overall class. There's still a chance that an Alabama, Ohio State, or a Florida State could sneak up and get Georgia, but um, I think that they will hold on to their number one class. First of all, um, but secondly. Um, I think that this is involving NIL. How could it not? Right? Why else would it?
Yeah.
Would that? What else could have happened within the past week that Raiola is now trending towards Nebraska? And I do see where Athens Steve, who's a notorious Georgia fan, now granted this is coming with some bias behind it, so take it with a grain of salt. But according to the spaces I listened to based on reporting, Raiola got an agent within the past month and wants UGA to match the $3 million that Nebraska is willing to pay him. On top of that, so it's not all about NIL, but it is partly about NIL. On top of that, um, Georgia told Raiola that if Beck declares for the draft, then they will go out and get a transfer quarterback. He didn't like hearing that, apparently. Um, Now, I don't think that Beck is going to declare, but that's kind of my opinion. I think that what you have to look at, though, on top of this, is that all of this stuff with Steve Wiltfong is coming from the Nebraska coaches, right? It's coming from the Nebraska camp, maybe coming from Dylan Raiola's camp, but I haven't heard anything. So, as far as I know, everything that that is coming out about Raiola's decision is coming from Nebraska because it fits what they want to do, right? It increases their chances with recruits. So a lot of this is coming from coaches telling recruits that we've got a shot at Dylan Raiola. Now, couple that with the fact that Raiola has actually reached out to some of these recruits for Nebraska as well, and it does sound like a pretty sticky situation. On top of that, Raiola is supposed to be starting his college practices this weekend at Georgia, and instead he's going to Nebraska to do another official visit. So I think that if you're reading the tea leaves, it sounds like Raiola is going to end up at Nebraska. But there's still, I guess, maybe like a 20% chance that he stays with Georgia. I don't think that at this point in his recruitment there should be any reason for wavering. Right? He's been sort of the bell cow recruit ever since the summer, and he's been the one going out and talking to other recruits for this Georgia class. Um, I think that where there's smoke, there's fire, and even as early as today, I was still kind of saying like, well, maybe there's a chance, but as I kind of dig further into this, I think that it's a pretty good bet that he's going to end up at Nebraska. Um, because of his and two, I think we have to mention his family ties for people who don't know. His dad, Dominic Raiola, played at Nebraska and played in the NFL as an offensive lineman. So there's a tie there. Also, his uncle is the offensive line coach at Nebraska, so there's a family tie there as well. Look, Nebraska was always going to have an inside, leg on this race, and they're I think that they're pulling out the NIL, trump card at this point and saying, hey, we need to be taken seriously as an organization and as a program in the NIL space for recruits to start paying attention to us. And what's and so and if you don't know, Nebraska does have a pretty good NIL, you know, presence, and I think that they're going to start flexing, here as lately they have been, and I think moving forward you can start taking Nebraska a little bit more seriously in recruiting and in transfer portals under Matt Rule. I think that this fan base is ready to win some football games, and it's deserved. Um, they've been chomping at the bit, and they're not afraid to spend some money to go get a quarterback. Again, it's not all about money. I do think that Raiola has a better opportunity to start right away, but I don't know that that's necessarily the best opportunity, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
So, even if Nebraska goes and gets Kyle McCord to start for a season or half a season or whatever, I think that Raiola, who has moved from I think it was Texas initially to Arizona, and then moved to Georgia in high school. This is all in high school. This past year, he played in Georgia near Athens. This past season to play in a better competition of football, and it was also to move towards Athens, given that he was supposed to be playing in Athens next year. But he's moved a lot to play in higher competition. He hasn't always been a quarterback. He was considered to be an offensive line prospect, really. I think through middle school, and it was up. I want to say it was his sophomore year that he decided to play quarterback. So
Yep.
this is a guy who is still pretty raw, considering all that. He's got a great arm, great size. All the attributes are there, but he really needs to think about his future and say, hey, am I better fit to sit for at least 1 year and then play for 2 seasons? Because I think that that's probably the better route to take. If he's worried about starting right away, then I just don't think that that's really in his best interest.
Yep.
And we saw him take a step up from Arizona to Georgia this past year and played at Buford, and he played okay. I mean, he was good. Don't get me wrong, but he didn't play like the number one player in the country, and we saw his recruiting ranking slide a little bit because of it. I just don't think that this guy's ready to go be a Big Ten starting quarterback,
Yeah.
and a D1 starting quarterback at that. In general, I do think that he'll have a better future playing at Georgia, playing behind a good offensive line. With potentially better weapons. We don't know what Nebraska is going to do moving forward. But I think that this is a really big head scratcher for those who follow recruiting. And I'm just anxious as I'm as anxious as anyone to see where it goes from here. And I really think that if I had a crystal ball, I'd probably put it towards Nebraska too at this point. But what are your thoughts on this, Mark?
Well, all we can do is follow the visits, and he's taking a visit to Nebraska this upcoming weekend. He just had an in-house with Georgia offensive coordinator Mike Bobo. Apparently, everything went well. Look, Georgia's going to be fine. Whatever happens here, Georgia fans, just calm down. It's going to be just fine. This guy hasn't played a snap of college football. And look, if it costs $3 million to get Dylan Raiola to come to your school and not play the first year, is that worth it? Is that really worth it? Because I mean, think of what else you could buy with that. And this is nothing against Dylan Raiola. He may be the next Tom Brady. I don't know. And in that case, I guess it would be worth it. And but I'm just asking the question: if you've got a $10 million NIL budget, is this guy worth 30% of it?
Yeah.
I don't know that's true. Um, a lot of this started with his goodbyes. He started saying goodbye on social media to his school and everything, and then there's been some smoke with the Nebraska thing, and then $3 million. So we'll have to see what happens here. But nobody, this is a $3 million blind investment. You have no idea what you're getting, and I totally agree with you there. So whatever Dylan Raiola decides to do, he's going to get a bag for it for sure, and it'll be very interesting to watch. And it's a very high profile player that we're going to have to keep our eye on throughout this process.
Hey, can
Let's
we talk a little bit before we move
mhm.
on about what this means for Georgia? assuming Dylan Raiola does end up at Nebraska.
Yeah.
Um, because I think that a lot gets talked about what Nebraska is going to add. I think a lot of people don't realize like how little Georgia would be losing by Dylan Raiola not coming to Georgia.
Yeah. Yeah.
They've got Ryan Puglisi. What are your thoughts on Puglisi first of all, and then how do you feel that this will affect the Georgia program?
Well, look, I like the Puglisi family's approach to recruiting a little bit better. And look, I'm a Georgia fan, so I'll tell you that we don't make no bones about that. We don't try to hide it. We're Georgia fans, but we're college football fans first and foremost. And um, this is a drop in the bucket for Georgia, and for Nebraska. We talked about that $3 million. Is it worth it or not? It probably is worth it for them. I don't know that it's worth it for Georgia. You've got a room full of quarterbacks, and I'm assuming that Carson Beck is coming back. That's what I'm thinking. Apparently, he's been evaluated about the same, about third round or something like that, for this upcoming draft. And a guy who's got first round potential like that, um, that there's a big difference in going first round and third. I assume Carson Beck is coming back and hope that he's coming back. Um, with all that being said, I mean, you got Gunnar Stockton waiting in the wings. I mean, this is a guy that Georgia fans, there's a lot of Georgia fans that like what Gunnar Stockton brings to the table, and some have even said more so than what Brock Vandegrift had brought to the table. This is a cup that overflows,
Mhm.
and that's what these top teams do. They're expert talent accumulators, and whenever you accumulate this much talent in this day and age, your cup, it has to runneth over. I mean, otherwise you will be caught in a situation. So I think Georgia has done a really good job positioning themselves where this isn't going to make or break the Georgia football team. They weren't counting on this guy to come in next year and play or anything like that, or possibly even the first couple of years. So I think that it's just kind of a wait and see thing. And if you want to play for a contender, you're going to go play for a Georgia. And if you're just wanting playing time and you're wanting the bag, you'll go to Nebraska. And I think part of these kids' thought processes are, well, I can go get that $3 million and then I can transfer, and they're not wrong. So who knows where this story leads? As I said, we're early on in this chapter book, and we're not peeking ahead. There's no way to peek ahead with this book that we're reading here.
Yeah.
Anything else on Rayola before we move
Don't
on?
you think though, and you mentioned this, you kind of led into this talking about it. If you have a $10 million budget, why spend 3 million on Raiola? Specifically, if you're Georgia, right, and you
Right.
have Puglisi, who reminds me a lot of Carson Beck, and with his size and his arm, and this was also an Elite 11 quarterback. Like this isn't some lowly ranked 3-star that has potential. Like he's a pretty good quarterback, and someone that Todd Monken identified, and they had an option. They had the option to go get Julian Sayin in this class, and Sayin was pretty much ready to come in. And
Hmm.
Georgia said, "Well, we could get Raiola, but we also really like Puglisi." And so this is a guy who is coming out of a state up in the Northeast that doesn't really play a whole lot of like really good football. So I take it with a grain of salt. He was playing against lesser talent, but I think that that's why his rating is what it is. And I think Georgia said, "Hey, we like his tools, we like his family and his commitment to Georgia." He didn't waver when Dylan Raiola came in. He did not shy away from competition, and he said, "I'm here for a long haul. I'm here for the marathon and not a sprint." So I think that he's coming in with the right attitude of, "Yeah, I'm going to sit for 1, 2, maybe even 3 years, but eventually I'll get a shot. I'll learn during that time, and I still have a path to the NFL." And so I just want to give a lot of credit to him, first and foremost, but also going back to my point, $3 million. Let's say Georgia was going to pay 2 million, right? Wouldn't you rather see Georgia go out and get a bona fide receiver with $2 million this year to play with Carson Beck and try to go win
Hmm.
another championship, because that's something that they don't have. So receivers notoriously are interested in getting paid, you know, and
Yeah.
so if you're going to throw $2 million at a position group, I think that Georgia would be better fit to throw it at receiver than they would quarterback. And you know, and I think that maybe there's a little bit of addition by subtraction here for Georgia, and they've got to spin it in a positive way somehow, right? So why not do it with a big name, you know, SEC receiver, maybe like a Luther Burden, you know, who's been rumored to want to go out and win a championship, who's not in the transfer portal. Don't get me wrong, but um, you know, maybe Georgia just I don't know, sends him like a late night text from a burner phone. It says, "Hey, we got $2 million with your name on it if you want to come." You know,
A little bit of that hotline bling.
yeah, I mean, let's not pretend that teams aren't out there doing that.
Of
So,
course they are.
um, but I think that it's interesting to take the Georgia angle on this as well, and wonder if they might spin it in a positive way.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. And for the record, I think it's probably worth the investment for Nebraska. Just the
Yeah,
publicity alone.
I agree.
Nebraska needs a spark. And if $3 million gets you that spark and it gets other players on campus, eh, you have to take that chance if you're Nebraska. So kudos to Nebraska for getting the bag man all ponied up and headed over to Dylan Raiola's place. It seems like it's working, as he will be visiting this coming up weekend. And you know what? We want to thank everybody for watching the show. We're not done yet. We've got some more recruiting news that we're going to get to here. But if you're watching this, welcome to First and Long College Football Show. We are so glad that you are here. We're building a community of college football fans from coast to coast, and this is a show by fans for fans. We're just a couple of college football fans. So if you would, it'd be very helpful if you don't mind to hit the thumbs up on the video. That helps us out a lot. Free of charge there to do that and help you boys out. Let's keep going through this recruiting news, and we're going to close out the show here with the top 15 recruiting rankings as of 12/12/23. Jordan Seaton. This was a 5-star offensive tackle from IMG Academy that we talked about last week, and it was thought that this guy was going to be either committing to Alabama or Ohio State. That was nobody had anybody else crystal balled or anything like that in this situation. Um, well, he goes on the Fox's show, Undisputed, alongside Skip Bayless and Keyshawn Johnson, and decides that he is going to commit to Colorado and Deion Sanders. Um, so this was a big surprise. Colorado was in his top 7 at one point, but had fell out during the final run-in, and so nobody thought that Colorado would be in the running for this thing. This is a big get for an offensive line that was absolutely horrible this past season. I mean, pound for pound, probably the worst offensive line in the country, as far as, the level of competition that they played and everything. That it was inadequate, and they got the quarterback hurt constantly. Something that has to be addressed. This is a huge get um, for Colorado and the Fighting Primes to get this 5-star offensive tackle out of IMG. What's your thoughts on that? That had to have been a shock to the Alabama and Ohio State folks.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, couple him with the 6 other offensive linemen that Colorado has gone out and got out of the transfer portal as well. And I think that you know, Dion and company are addressing the most significant position group and what they need. So I think that's really important. Excuse me, there were 5 other ones. One of these guys I'm looking at is leaving Colorado, but you know, that's obviously an issue that had to be addressed, and they're doing it as best as possible. I mean, how what better way to protect Shador? You know, if he decides to come back, um, than to bring in as many offensive linemen as you can and just see what sticks. You know, couple him with some wide receivers, and you know, Colorado's offense really probably isn't going anywhere.
Yeah, and this was a good passing offense. Could not run the ball worth a crap. I
Yeah.
mean, could not run the ball. Gave up over 60 sacks for the season. Unbelievably bad performance for that offensive line. But hold the phone. We got another Colorado commit here. A guy named Draylon Miller. He's one of the top offensive weapons in the state of Texas for the 2024 recruiting class. He was a 4-star wide receiver. He also committed to Colorado this past Sunday. So this game, about 2 months after decommitting from Texas A&M, obviously read the writing on the wall there with the Jimbo Fisher situation. The wide receiver from the Lone Star State stands 6 foot, 190 pounds, great hands, natural with the ball in his hands, and he has actually the ability to play running back and has done that some in high school. He's a top 70 prospect overall in the 24 class, according to 24/7, and the number 12 rated player in the state of Texas, and top 15 nationally among wide receivers. This is another nice get. These offensive recruits are much needed pledges for Dion and Colorado, as they're currently ranked 54th in recruiting. That's not going to get it done. I mean, you've got to at least crawl that thing up into the top 25, right? And they need that influx of talent, even with the transfer portal. As hard as they're hitting it, um, we've talked about it time and time again, man. The transfer portal is for plugging holes. This is where you build your boat with the high school recruiting. This is how the raft is built, and you just plug the holes with the transfers. But look, Colorado's average player rating is a respectable 91.8 point 0.08. So the quality of guys that they're getting are good through high school recruiting. It's just they're not getting them in huge droves or anything. Let's see if Dion can build up some momentum. What do you think about that kid at wide receiver?
I mean, it's a huge get. Obviously, this um, yeah, I mean, you couldn't ask for much more. Top 100 overall player at receiver, and that's a position group that outside of Travis, I think Travis Hunter. I think that they really didn't have too many options. I think the other one was Wheaton, if I'm not mistaken. But I think that they could use a little bit of a facelift in the receiving room as well. And let's just see if this offense can get going. That they need a lot of pieces on defense as well. So I think that that's kind of the next area to address in the transfer portal and through recruiting. But it's a good start to go out and get the weapons and say, hey, we may give up 40, but we're going to score 50 every game.
Right. Right. Well, you got to start somewhere. Like old Bobby Bowden used to say, you start off losing big, and then you lose by a little, and then you win by a little, and then you win by a lot.
Yeah.
So that's definitely the path in which Colorado's going to have to take. As as much of a failure as some people acted like this past season was. I mean, it was a decent season considering they won one game the year before. Now we're going to really see Coach Prime's coaching acumen come into play at this point, and getting the talent on campus is one thing, and getting them up to speed and building a culture that is a winning culture is it's a whole nother thing. So it's going to be interesting to see how that goes for the Colorado Buffs and the Fighting Primes. Let's keep it moving. A guy named Cohen Eccles has decommitted from Texas A&M. He decommitted on December 8th, along with several other players in the wake of Jimbo Fisher's firing. He is a 4-star interior offensive lineman who was initially interested in Texas, Auburn, and Texas Tech early in his recruitment. That's going to be a guy to watch as he is. And look, it's been the floodgates have opened up at Texas A&M, as you could imagine, after the Jimbo Fisher era came to an end, or almost, I guess, a crashing halt. And then a guy named, and these guys are not related, okay? Cohen Eccles and Jonathan Eccles are not brothers, okay? I had to go and make sure. But a guy named Jonathan Eccles also decommitted on the same day from the Tennessee Vols, and it looks like Holden Stays is coming in from Notre Dame to play tight end for the Vols. This was probably the domino that fell that caused that to happen and caused Tennessee to want to go get that guy from Notre Dame. So this was a big decommitment for the Tennessee Vols, but quickly they conduct some damage control there. So he's going to end up following his original recruiter, Alex Golish, who was at Tennessee, and he's going to be in a first year program at USF. He's a 4-star tight end, ranked number 18 among tight ends in his class. So great get for South Florida. Kind of going out of sight, out of mind. But best of luck to Jonathan Eccles on that. Let's kind of just jump through some of these top 15 team recruiting rankings, and If you guys got some some recruiting intel or portal intel for that matter, throw it in the comment section. We'd love to hear it, hear what everybody's saying on all your individual fan bases, chat rooms, and all that good stuff. We read as much of that stuff as we can, but we're in the internet age of endless information. So if you would leave us a comment on that, that would be much appreciated. Top 15 team recruiting rankings as of December 12th, 2023. That's the 10th time I've said that. I'm trying to make sure that when we clip this thing up, I'm stating that it's December 12th, 2023, and this is all subject to change. But you've got your usual suspects up top. One of the things, and I'm going to throw this on the screen so you all can see it. But one of the things that kind of pops out to me about this is the Florida teams. You've got FSU, Florida, and Miami in the top six there. Um, that's a big deal, not only for those teams in the state of Florida, but big for the rest of the teams on this list. Another team that pops out to me on this list is Notre Dame, as they are in the top 10 in recruiting and transfer portal. So I think that that's really, really big for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, obviously. And you've got more, like I said, of your usual suspects. Clemson rounding out the top 15 there, Tennessee, Penn State, LSU, and Auburn there 11 through 15. Auburn is a team that we've talked about a lot. They're on the rise, and a team that I've certainly got my eye on. They've got a very hard schedule next year, but we got a 12-team playoff, and I'm not so sure they can't make a run at that if the dominoes fall in the correct order. Any thoughts on these recruiting rankings or any more recruiting buzz that we need to know about?
No, I think that that's pretty much it for recruiting. I mean, typical suspects up top: UGA, Ohio State, Florida State, and Alabama. Florida sneaking in at number 5, and then Miami at 6. It's interesting that the 3 Florida schools are participating in recruiting in a way that they haven't in the past 5 years or so. So I think that that's pretty interesting, given that the state of Florida is such a recruiting hotbed for talent. So let's see how that affects the other teams. And then also let's just keep an eye on Dylan Raiola to figure out where he's going, and see if somebody else can unseat the Georgia Bulldogs in the number 1 overall slot for 2023.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's going to be a topsy turvy situation, man. It's going to be crazy. We're going to try to keep you guys updated as much as we can. That's why it's super important that everybody subscribes to the show. We post community posts throughout the week. If we can't get on and go live, we'll at least drop some breaking news to you. So what you're going to want to do is hit that bell and make sure that you're getting notifications from the First and Long College Football Show. But that's going to about do it for us today. We certainly do appreciate you tuning in. We hope that you'll like the video, and we hope that you'll come on back to the First and Long College Football Show. We'd love to have you. We'll be going probably live next week. We'll see. We may do a recorded version of this, but regardless, we're very active in the comment section. If you got any comments, we'll be usually very quick to respond to those. Thank you all so much again for tuning in. For Marcus and Mason, we are signing out. Thanks for watching the First and Long College Football Show.
Thanks.